Hey everyone, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Brittany Skyler, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, a clinician for Reach Out and Read talks about the importance of reading along with children at a young age. Then an actor/director talks about how she created a collection of short horror stories that dive into urban legends, psychological twists, and supernatural thrills. After that, the director of Northern Manhattan Parks for the New York Restoration Project talks about their 1,000 Chestnut Challenge. And finally, a rep from the Environmental Defense Fund and from the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance talks about the 2025 Warehouse Boom Report and its findings. So stay tuned, all this and much more is headed your way because we're now officially open. Hey everyone, I'm Brittany Skyler, and today is Tuesday, May 27th. You're now watching Open, a program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. Reach Out and Read is a national program that partners with pediatric clinicians to support early literacy and healthy parent-child relationships. During well-child visits, doctors give families age-appropriate books and talk with caregivers about the importance of reading aloud. Joining us now is a clinician with Reach Out and Read, Dr. Lauren Jen. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I am so excited to talk about this. As I mentioned before, I'm a huge reader, so I can only imagine the importance of starting it so young. So to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about Reach Out and Read and what exactly do they do?
Thank you. So Reach Out and Read is an absolutely fantastic program that partners with clinicians, pediatric care providers, doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs, to bring culturally responsive and multilingual books into well-child visits or checkups, and also to talk about the importance of reading and building these skills for our youngest children.
And tell me, what does that look like on a New York City scale, and what does that look like for this area in particular?
Reach Out and Read of Greater New York has an amazing footprint. We have 226 sites around New York City, Long Island, and the Hudson Valley area. In the last year, we touched over 225,000 kids with books and distributed over 350,000 books.
That's so amazing. I think reading is something that should be accessible to everybody, but sometimes it isn't. So I think it's a great way to put that, to intertwine that with your child's doctor visits. So in that, tell me exactly how does Reach Out and Read fit into the child's appointment, and what goes on, and what is the step-by-step procedure?
Such a good question. So when kids come in for their checkups or their well-child visits, there's so many different parts of it, and assessing development is part of that. With Reach Out and Read, clinicians are trained to use the book as a tool in assessing development. So we start the visit by giving families a new book, often a book we try our best to be a book in their language. And then we use the book as we assess a child's development. We see how kids interact with it. And then we talk to families about the importance of reading and give them different tips on how to use the book with their kids.
That's amazing, and I think that's a great educational tool, not only for the child, but the parent. But let's go back to these numbers. Over 219,000 children served and almost 346,000 books distributed. How do you make that happen? How does that happen on such a large scale?
Reach Out and Read of Greater New York is very fortunate to have partnerships with some of our publishers, like Scholastic. We have a few of their books here today, as well as state funding and private donations.
Scholastic is such a throwback for me. I feel like every kid remembers that Scholastic book fair and just the excitement and just the air in the morning. It's such a great feeling. And to know that, again, these kids are getting these level of books is amazing. And so let's talk about reading aloud and just the importance it has on children and their development in their early years.
Reading aloud does so many things for our kids in their early years. So, of course, it's so important and foundational for early literacy. It's also essential for speech and language development. But the really special thing about reading aloud is that it does so much more than that. So, reading aloud when kids are connected with their parents or caregivers helps to reinforce what we call a safe, stable, and nurturing relationship. If you're sitting with a young child on your lap, holding them as you're reading the book, they can feel you, they can feel the warmth of your voice. They also hear how sometimes we do silly voices when we're reading, we give characters voices. This all cues in babies' brains as they're learning to speak, and it really helps to reinforce a routine. It also does so much for our caregivers as well. Having a new baby can be really overwhelming. And we always say babies don't come with user manuals. So reading helps parents to build a routine and build confidence. We talk a lot about book, bath, brushing, bedtime, and all of those things go together to help babies get a routine, get a nighttime routine, and reinforce just the importance of doing this every day.
I love the idea of the relationship building in this, right? I go back to my childhood, and my mom read every book under the sun to me, from like Eric Carle and the nursery rhymes. And even when you get to a certain age, that becomes more educational on things of like, how to protect yourself as a child and those kinds of books. So I think that is so important. And also just thinking about the specific guidelines and the different types of books that we are giving to kids. So with Reach Out and Read, when you do provide these books, are there any particular guidelines that you're looking for? I mean, we have some right here that if you want to talk a little bit about, tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you. We make sure that we give a developmentally appropriate book, which means for our youngest kiddos, they get a lovely board book. So something that they can put in their mouth, which is totally developmentally normal, and we love to see babies grabbing things and putting them in their mouth. Also, chunky board books are easier for those little hands to turn the pages. And then as they get older, we give them paper books. So that's one thing that we think of when we give a book. We also, Reach Out and Read of Greater New York has really made a commitment to books that reflect our families in the greater New York City area. So we try really hard to make sure that the book is in a language that the child or caregiver reads or understands. And we also, as we hear about in education as well, we think of books as mirrors and windows. So a mirror where a child can see themselves reflected in the book, can feel validated in who they are. And then also a window to open their cultural horizons, to open their minds to different things that are out there.
It's so funny. I was just jumping to that question of mirrors and windows. So can you elaborate a little bit more just on how they help shape a child's view of the world and themselves?
Absolutely. We know when kids see themselves in a character, it helps them to build confidence. It helps them to feel seen. So some of the books we have here today are some of my favorites for that. So when a little baby or a family, right? Our little babies aren't able to read the books, but when a family is traveling, say, to Santo Domingo, and they get a book about that, that really reinforces that this is a positive experience and that they are seen and valued. The same thing when we have books with characters of different races, when we see different types of families reflected in books, it's so important for children.
Absolutely. And I also feel like it's just a reinforcement, again, of that educational component. Like you said, if they're going to go on vacation and they kind of read the book beforehand, of course they're a little young, but it kind of helps, prepare them for what they're going into. And so in that, you also mentioned why you would give certain kids books at their specific ages. So let's talk about how parents can track their child's milestones within the first year, and what do those look like?
So when you go to the pediatrician's office, sometimes you're there because you need your vaccines, but a lot of times what we're doing is assessing development. So we do that in lots of different ways. Sometimes parents get a little questionnaire before they walk in the room. But for us, and the great thing about Reach Out and Read is that it teaches us to use the books and to help you use the books to reinforce with families appropriate child development. So like I said before, we love to see babies putting books in their mouth. That is a totally normal thing. So our 0 to 6 month old babies, we see them kind of looking at you as you're reading, so we know that they're hearing more, they're starting to see more. Our 6 to 12 month old babies are reaching out, they're putting the books in their mouth, they're sometimes throwing the books on the floor, another reason why we love a sturdy board book. And they kind of are trying, sometimes if there's like a lift the flap, they can try to do that. And then our toddlers are looking at pictures, the things that they see. Oh, I have a dog and I see it in the book. They point to that. They start to make the noises. And they also are really able to interact with the books, the lift, the flap, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I will say doing some research on this organization was my first time hearing about the organization. Now, granted, I don't have children, but for the viewers at home who might be learning about this for the first time, how do they make sure that they're able to enroll in this program and get these books in their pediatrician's visits?
Well, definitely visit our website, reachoutandread.org, and you can look for find a site or find a provider, and you can see all of the different sites that are enrolled in this program. Again, in the New York City area, we have 226 sites. So we really have a huge footprint in so many different neighborhoods getting books to kids.
Awesome. And now just tell me, what do you hope for the future of Reach Out and Read, especially as more families face challenges around early childhood development and education?
So, wow, what a question, right? We are really excited to continue building partnerships. Reach Out and Read has a fantastic partnership with public libraries, so trying to connect families into public libraries as well. And we would love to try to reach more and more families, as well as trying to expand our age ranges. Is something that is definitely on the horizon for the program, is something they would love to be able to do.
Absolutely. And now, just before we wrap up, we have a little bit of time. Let's go through these books. I didn't want you to come bring them here for nothing. Tell me a little bit about every book and maybe what some of the feedback from the kids, if you've heard about any feedback on these books.
Absolutely. So this one is one of my favorites for our little babies. And like I said, for my patients in the Bronx, many of whom have roots in the DR, they absolutely love this book. This is also one of my absolute favorites. It is a collection of family recipes. It's in English and Spanish. And we spend so much time talking about reading and development. And then also one of the other things pediatricians talk about is healthy eating.
Yeah.
So getting to give families a book that talks about family recipes is so important, because it's really important that families feel connected also to the nutritional discussion. It should be something that is relevant for them. And I will say this one is a personal favorite in my household. Eyes That Kiss in the Corners. My kids have seen themselves reflected in this book and absolutely love it and feel completely validated by it. So thank you.
That's amazing. This is such a family affair. Doctor, thank you again so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
To learn more about the mission of this organization, please visit their website at reachoutandreadnyc.org. Don't go away. We'll be back with more Open right after this. Welcome back. Rashá Robinson is the creator of Vault 13, a chilling and original horror anthology series that's now streaming on the Versus Media app. With gripping stories rooted in urban legends, psychological twists, and supernatural suspense, Vault 13 brings a fresh, culturally rich perspective to the horror genre. Please join me in welcoming Rashá Robinson. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I am so excited to talk about this. I'm not one for like the horror and thriller genre, but I just saw a thriller movie a few weeks ago and I'm like, I think I can get into this. So I'm so excited to talk about your project. So to start off, before we even get into the project, let's start off with your journey. How did you get into acting and filmmaking?
Well, I've always was like a dramatic kid, so that plays a part. But when I went back to school in college, I went for my associate's degree in performing arts, and I took acting 2 years, and I fell in love with it. And it was like I was passionate about it ever since, and I've always been a writer. Since I was a teenager, I've been writing stories, like 3-subject notebooks. My sisters used to read them from nowhere. I don't know where I get these stories from, but everybody loved my stories. So I've always been in the same performing arts, acting, writing. So that came back to me in my adulthood.
It's so funny when that happens because you think these are like funny little hobbies as a kid, and then when you feel like, oh, I can do this as an adult, it's so fun.
It is.
But tell me also what kind of forced you to make that transition from in front of the camera to behind the camera, and tell me what did you learn the most from behind the camera or in front of the camera that you were able to take with you behind the scenes?
Yeah, so first I was on acting again. So I got back in acting again, and I just loved being on set. It's something about being on set, being, in production, filming, that just thrives me, and I have a passion for it. So when I was acting, I'm like, I have all these, books, these little mini stories. People were telling me, why don't you turn it into like a series or something, or a movie, and do your own thing? And I'm like, I wasn't confident about, being a filmmaker, but then once I got into it again, I was like, oh yeah, it's just something about being behind the camera or on the camera. I just love it. So that was like awesome to me.
It's always such a fun experience,
It is.
and I feel like you take these experiences with you when you're in front of the camera, that it makes you make smarter decisions behind the camera.
Yes, absolutely. So when I was acting, I observe everything.
Yeah.
So, and I always ask questions, and I always network, from other actors, even actors that I've worked with in the past. It's like, oh, well, I'll do an episode for you. So networking is very important, and just, building relationships too, and asking questions. And that's how I learned, okay, so I don't do this when I'm making this film. I don't do this, but I do this. It's a learning experience, and I'm still growing and evolving, now too, so.
I feel like being curious is the key to being successful.
Absolutely.
Because I also do production work, but I've always been in front of the camera first. So as a producer, I'm always thinking about, okay, now how does this translate in front of the camera?
Exactly.
And it just makes you so much sharper. And then also just makes you more versatile.
It does.
Like you could
It
just
does.
work anywhere.
Yes.
It's so cool. Yeah. So, tell me, as a Black female filmmaker from Westchester with strong ties to New York City, how have your roots influenced your creative voice?
Oh, wow. Well, we have a lot of big actors and people, creatives coming from New York and Mount Vernon in general. I'm born and raised Mount Vernon. We have Felicia Rashad, Dick Clark, Heavy D. Big names come from Westchester and New York in general. And I feel like that kind of inspired me too, to put Mount Vernon back on the map again. So definitely, it's a lot of creatives in New York in general. And I feel like the East Coast is becoming more of Hollywood now. It's like everything is, from, Tyler Perry Studios to like, Power, 50 Cent Productions, everything is coming to New York and East Coast. So I feel like the old Hollywood is kind of like going away, and everything is coming to New York in a sense. So, yeah.
I know, it's so funny that you mentioned that because I, of course, work in this space, and everybody's like, are you going to go out to the West Coast? And it's like, why? Everything's moving to the East Coast.
They just built a Lionsgate in Yonkers. So,
right.
Yeah, so it's like,
why am I going to leave home?
Right.
Leave home and be stuck in hot weather.
Exactly.
No, I'll take winter.
Right.
But let's talk about Vault 13. Tell me, what is it about?
So it's a horror anthology series. So with each episode, it's like 3 mini horror stories.
Okay.
Twisted, weird, creepy. I fell in love with horror like as a kid. Goosebumps. It went all the way back to Goosebumps. You know, from Tales from the Hood, Tales from the Crypt, all the above anthology series, made me grow a passion for it. And I just was like, I had so many mini stories. I was just like, let me just film little 15-minute shorts and put them all in like one episode, you know? And that's, yeah, it's creeped out. It's creepy.
The moment you said like mini, you know, in one episode, 3 stories in one, I immediately thought of Goosebumps.
Yes.
But I also thought of American Horror Story.
Yes.
That is, I think, one of the biggest horror anthology series. Did that have a little bit of an influence as well?
It did. I feel like also, I'm more of an old school horror girl.
Nice.
So I'm more of a nostalgic Alfred Hitchcock type of Twilight Zone, that type of weird, but that definitely tied into everything too, you know, Black Mirror and everything like that. So all of the old school horror, because I'm not like a gory girl.
Yeah.
So you won't see gore or nothing like that, but you'll see a lot of implied, you know, stuff in my stories too. So it's kind of nostalgic.
We're not seeing like Terrifier, but sometimes, sometimes I think the implications are almost as scary as seeing it in itself. No,
absolutely, and make the viewers think and like, oh, what happens next, or want more. And I feel like that's what my series bring. Yeah.
I am so intrigued. You have to tell me what is your favorite episode or your favorite story that you've put on.
Oh my God, it's so hard to choose from.
Are they all like your babies?
They're all my babies. It's like I've all birthed them. I really don't know. I would say my first episode because I did it on a whim. It wasn't organized, it wasn't planned. I just took my script and did it, filmed my first episode myself. It was me. And the storyline was like an actress was pressured, under pressure to memorize her lines, and she kind of goes into the psychological thriller at that. So I feel like the first episode is my baby, probably.
I'm telling you, the psychological thrillers are. I just saw The Weeknd's film a few weeks ago.
Oh my God.
And I felt like, first and foremost, I left the theater feeling like I just need to process what I just watched.
Right.
And I didn't realize just how impactful a thriller like that can be. So I can only imagine. What is it like filming that level of work behind the scenes?
It could be a little tough because, you know, I do have help and everything, you know, my family, my friends. Jarrell is here too, so shout out to him. I do have help and everything, but it can be tough too, just trying to execute it the way you have it in your head. It's like, because when I create these stories, I have a vision. I'm like, okay, I want, can you do it like this, and can you do it like this? And sometimes I'm kind of a softie, but you have to be a little bit, you know, tough a little bit to, you know, convey it as you want.
Yeah.
You know, so that could be a little tough. But me getting into director mode, I'm still warm, friendly, you know, it's always a good time on set with me. It's always a fun time. But I'm also, you know, serious because I do want it to play out how I envision it, you know. So, yeah.
Would you say that's one of the biggest challenges, or are there other ones that kind of trump that one?
Well, before I started, I feel like it was limitations. I felt like I was limited to just being an actor. And I felt like I had to get myself from around certain people that put me in this box of you're just an actor, you know, because I'm not just an actor. I'm a writer, I'm a creator, you know, I'm this, I'm that. So once I got out of that box of limitations and saying, hey, I really can do this, that was the hardest part, just stepping in and doing it. And then I felt like I just got my feet wet and then learned from my mistakes as I continue.
Yeah. I feel like in the past few years or so, just in Hollywood on a fuller scale, we've seen so many people breaking out of that box, out of that genre box, whether it's music, acting, choreography. We've seen everybody breaking out of that box, and it's so cool to see just the work that people can do when you let them outside of that label.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And, you know, also tell me, what has been one of the biggest joys about producing this project?
Making my stories come to life. Yeah. Seeing it out on the screen is like, oh my God, I wrote that? Like, seeing it come out and seeing it come to life is one of the biggest joys that I can picture. So that is it's just an amazing feeling when you see that, like, when you see what you thought in your head. What was a thought is now reality. Yeah. When
you see it like there on the big screen, it's like, this was a piece of paper, this was a script. And when you see it come
in my head.
Right. You never think about what's in your head, you can translate it.
Exactly.
And when it works out the exact way or even better, you feel like
oh my God. Yeah. Such a joy. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so tell me, this project is homed on Versus Media.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that in that platform.
Yeah, so Versus Media actually reached out because it was an independent platform for independent filmmakers and indie artists in general. And I reached out to the owner, I emailed him, I pitched, Vault 13, I showed him a couple episodes, and he's like, oh, wow. These are pretty dope. Come along, and I'm a horror fan. So, yeah, we would like to put this on our platform. And ever since then, it was a go. Yeah. So.
Nice. And what has the feedback been like from viewers?
Well, from family, they're like, you think like this? Like, what? like what is this? But I'm like, I've always been a horror girly. But from other fans, they're really intrigued by it. They're like, whoa, this is some creepy stuff. I just went to a little film festival the other day, and everybody was like, that was good. Like, that was, whoa. So the feedback has been awesome. Pretty good so far. Yeah.
That's amazing. And now tell me, are we in for a season 2? Are there any more projects on the way? And when am I coming to the red carpet?
Yes, absolutely. So there is going to be a part 2. Right now we're doing 6 episodes. We're in production right now. We're going to do a mid-break, and then we're going to do another 6, filming again in August. But right now I'm currently working on my movie full feature that I wrote. Just finished recording a little bit of it, just about a day ago. We got started on that. That's a horror film too. And also another movie that I'm starring in, it's not mine, but another movie that I'm starring in called Pretty Girl Kills is going to be out soon. That's a horror sci-fi too.
Yeah.
So I'm just like in horror everywhere. So it's like
that's your genre. You're like a scream queen.
Yeah. Thank you. I like that. Yeah. So that's update for right now. Yeah.
You are absolutely booked and busy. I love that for
yes.
you. Now tell me, as you go into season 2 and you go into these other projects, what did you learn from season 1 that you're like, okay, let's do this differently this time?
Yeah, so like I said, I feel like my editing skills got better from the first episode to now. Picking actors has gotten more, I have to be specific on what I'm looking for. And even being on set, I actually know what I want and how I want to say it too. Because, when you're working with actors, people are, we're people.
Yeah.
So we have to talk to each other like, warm, friendly. So I've learned, and I'm still growing and still evolving. Even equipment, technology-wise, it's like, okay, I know what to do. Season 2 is going to be perfect. Almost. Nothing is perfect, but almost.
Well, we cannot wait. Rashá, thank you so much for sitting down with us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
So to learn more about this project, please go to versusmedia.com and search for Vault 13. Stay tuned. We have more open for you right after this.
19.7% of Bronxites currently experience food insecurity. Meanwhile, instead of these nice, colorful foods, this is the best food that they have access to. If this sounds like you, there are a bunch of resources to get healthy food for free or cheap. If you want to help, you might consider donating or volunteering in one of these places. Community fridges like this one are all over the city and allow New Yorkers to conveniently donate extra food to people who might need it. Go to this link and find your nearest one. Food banks and pop-up events like these provide millions of healthy meals to families in need. These organizations are distributing meals to Bronxites as we speak and are always accepting donations and volunteers.
We're gonna start the show right now. This is my favorite part. Ready in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hey, this is Angel, and I am one of the instructors for the in-studio production. Here at BronxNet, we offer classes that can help you elevate, expand, and start your television career. All you have to do is sign up at bronxnet.org/education. For the past 7 years, I have been in various productions, spanning from talk shows, independent films, news reports, art displays, teachings, musical performances, and many more. Ain't that right, Angel? Yeah, you're absolutely right, Angel. There are a lot of creative individuals that we're just waiting to sign up for the class. And if I may, can I also express thank you, Angel. That's all the time we have left. Visit bronxnet.org/education and become a producer by taking the course. The class I offer is also in English, en español, y también bilingüe. Nos vemos en la próxima clase.
Welcome back. New York Restoration Projects is proud to partner with longtime American chestnut conservationist Bart Cesar and the American Chestnut Foundation to help distribute American chestnut saplings throughout the 5 boroughs. Called the 1,000 Chestnut Challenge, the project's goal is to eventually establish 1,000 thriving American chestnut trees throughout our local urban tree canopy with the help of committed volunteers. Joining me now to discuss this challenge is the Director of Northern Manhattan Parks for NYRP, Jason Smith. Jason, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. So, just to kick things off, NYRP's mission emphasizes that access to nature is a fundamental human right. Can you elaborate on this and how this principle guides your work in Northern Manhattan?
Absolutely. It's so important to what NYRP does. Too many neighborhoods in New York don't have access to clean, well-maintained green space. And if you can't bring your kid to a park to play or to have a picnic or just to spend some time after work under a canopy, it has real health impacts. It has impacts to the fabric of a neighborhood. And so that's our guiding mission, is to make sure that it's not just the wealthier neighborhoods with the well-known parks that have really lovely, special green spaces. It just, across the board for a neighborhood, makes all kinds of differences. And in Northern Manhattan, we have some great parks, and we're blessed with incredible natural resources, but particularly where we work on the east side of Inwood and Washington Heights, there's a legacy of disinvestment, underinvestment, a lot of inaccessible parks due to road building. And so we work in those places that still need support from the private sector, community members to bolster what the city can provide and make sure that those parks continue to become healthier, more accessible, and safer.
Right. I've done a few stories on tree canopy coverage, and it's alarming when you think about the lack of it and what that eventually could lead to if it's not fixed soon.
Yeah, and like our parks, the tree canopy also has an equity story where different neighborhoods have different qualities of tree canopy, and that affects air quality and temperatures and people's health. And as climate change increases, the importance of that canopy only grows.
Absolutely. And so in that, the NYRP stewards over 80 acres of parkland in Northern Manhattan, including Highbridge Park, Sherman Creek, and the Harlem River Greenway. What are some of the most significant challenges and successes you've encountered in these areas?
So I think the biggest challenge is kind of what we touched on with the nature of the equity challenges of green space in New York, is just green spaces in New York City remain underfunded. And so raising money just for the day-to-day stewardship and love of these spaces is a huge challenge across the city. And so that's really what we're about, is kind of meeting that gap. And then, increasingly, we mentioned climate change. We're seeing all kinds of environmental changes that are stressing our green spaces. And so that's a big challenge, but also a big opportunity for us. So we're able to do some interesting nature-based solutions to try to improve our parks. That might be building wetlands, restoring forests, making rain gardens to manage floodwaters. So all of those challenges are growing, and so we're asking more of our parks. And so that's been both a challenge, but a really exciting opportunity, a place where we've been innovating with what we do in the parks.
And tell me, is there any specific resistance that you're met with when you go to these parks, or what is that like?
Well, it's New York City, so anything you're doing in the public sector is complicated, right? And so part of my job is to work with public agencies and community members and try to come up with like common sense solutions for improvements to our parks that all make sense. And I would say it's when you start to engage folks, it's much easier to build consensus and support behind simple things like making your park more beautiful, more ecologically functional, even though sometimes it seems like you can get 2 New Yorkers in a room and you'll have a disagreement. When it comes to like a beautiful, functional park, we can generally find consensus, although climate change and sea level rise is really challenging that, right? As we start to face challenges that are on a bigger scale than our green space has met in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you just mentioned getting people involved, right? And community involvement is central to NYRP's approach. So how do local residents participate in the stewardship and programming of these green spaces?
There's all kinds of ways that we work with communities, and so we own and operate 51 community gardens around the city, and those are all like self-governed garden spaces, and so community members can join a garden or they can go volunteer at a garden. When we renovate a garden, we do a long kind of community engagement process. In the parks, it's a similar kind of dialogue with our partners and community members if we're making changes. The simplest way to get involved is just to get on our website, nyrp.org, and find an opportunity to volunteer or a program to come out and participate in. But yeah, it's a kind of a multi-level process of working with communities and us as an organization learning how to do a better job listening and working with communities.
Yeah, of course. And now let's get into this challenge, the 1,000 Chestnut Challenge. It sounds like such a fun social media challenge, I will say. It has a great name to it. But the 1,000 Chestnut Challenge aims to restore the American chestnut to its historic range. What role does this initiative play in the NYRP's broader environmental and community goals?
So it is a really exciting challenge for a lot of ways. One of the ways it fits in with our work, we were talking a little bit about community engagement, and it's really like a bottom-up program, right? So the 1,000 Chestnut Challenge was come up with by a volunteer we work with in Brooklyn, and they were collecting seeds on chestnut trees in Greenwood Cemetery, Prospect Park, and trying to grow them in their refrigerators and basements, and they were running out of room. And so we decided we would work together to scale up the program. And people are coming to us to register to plant a tree, and they are deciding where they go. And so it's not kind of a top-down program like you need a chestnut here. And so it's very much responding to the communities we work with and addressing, we hope, those gaps in the canopy we talked about, and providing a tool for people to learn about our environmental ecological history at the same time.
Yeah, of course. And so we talked a little bit about this before the interview. The American chestnut was once a dominant tree in eastern forests. And so what makes it so important to restore it in an urban environment like New York City today?
It's just like an incredible time where we have a chance to bring back what was a giant of our forests. It was sometimes called like the redwood of the East. So the trees could be over 10 feet wide, over 100 feet tall, and they produced bountiful harvests of nuts every year. So they were so important to the ecosystems of the eastern U.S. Oftentimes put on a scale with the passenger pigeon or the buffalo as an ecological tragedy, that this kind of wonderful abundance of early America was lost as part of the modernization and the settlement of the U.S. And so we're now have an opportunity to start to bring that back. So that on a big scale is just really exciting. And again, to be able to do that with individual volunteers working in their backyards or their local parks is a terrific opportunity to do real serious conservation and bring back a tree that's gone. And it's also coming at a time when our forests are under increasing threat. So like many New Yorkers don't realize, but we have a lot of natural forest in the city, and it's important for the health of our city, but we're losing a lot of our native trees. So we recently lost all of the hemlocks in New York, and we're losing our ash trees and our beech trees. Variety of diseases are getting introduced by global trade and introduced plants, and so our forests are really struggling and under threat. And it's we oftentimes think of the biodiversity crisis happening elsewhere, but we're in the midst of a biodiversity crisis in New York. And so this is a chance for individuals to step up and help with that biodiversity crisis in a very real, very productive way. A lot of times environmental action can involve like not doing things or not, we have sort of like messages of don't buy plastic, don't fly on an airplane, and all those are important things. But increasingly we need to think about like, what can I do productively to help deal with some of our environmental problems? And this is one simple step people can take that is beyond just planting a tree. It's planting a tree that was on the verge of extinction and is now we have a chance to bring it back.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that you could potentially do in your own backyard, right? And I think it's something that you can, I mean, they always say like plant the trees, you know, that kind of thing. And so I think it's really important, and it's really cool that community members are able to get involved on this level. So tell me, how can people sign up if they want to sign up? What does that look like?
Sure, and I should first say not every backyard is right for a chestnut, because these are trees that, if they survive the blight, will get very big. But and NYRP does have a tree giveaway program with all kinds of trees. But if you're interested in learning more about the chestnut program, helping out, or registering to get a tree, again, our website, nyrp.org/chestnut. Fill out a short form, and we've already been inundated in requests for chestnuts, but thankfully this is a multi-year initiative. So if folks are interested and we're not able to get everyone a tree this spring, we'll be doing it for the next few years, increasing the scale as we go. So it's the interest has really been through the roof, and I think it speaks to people really wanting to have an opportunity to make a difference.
That's great to hear, and it sounds like that this is a project that's going to come to fruition for years from now.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, it's an exciting time because we're increasingly confident that our trees will survive to maturity, and that's really good news. But it's a journey, right? We want to get to a healthy, genetically diverse population of disease-resistant trees, and that's going to take a long time, and that's part of why it's also an educational and a science opportunity, right? Because we're asking people to plant a tree and keep track of it and measure it and report back to us. And we hope to build out a network of people who are keeping track of their trees, and if their trees are doing well, maybe even harvesting those seeds and sharing them down the line. And so it's not going to happen overnight. That will bring the chestnut back on a really meaningful scale.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think just with the small steps, or, you know, the steps here and there, they're going to add up in the end. And so with that, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with us this morning. I feel like I've learned so much in the last 12 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I encourage folks to sign up and register and learn more about the project.
Awesome. Thank you so much. To learn more about the 1,000 Chestnut Challenge, please visit the website nyrp.org. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Open after this.
What's up, creative family? Discover your voice with BronxNet Community Media classes. Are you ready to bring your ideas to life? At BronxNet, we offer television production classes for community members ages 18 and over, empowering you to share your vision with the world. Get certified in field production, in-studio production, and our new exciting addition, podcast production. Once certified, you can create your own show to air on one of our 6 TV channels. It all starts with our free Unleash Your Ideas Masterclass, designed to help you plan your show idea and set you up for success on your production journey. This class is offered at the beginning of each month for your convenience. Our dedicated BronxNet team is here to support, encourage, and uplift you every step of the way. Join us and become a part of the creative force that engages and inspires the Bronx community and beyond. Sign up today and start your media journey with BronxNet. Visit bronxnet.org/education to learn more and register. Let's create something amazing together.
Welcome back. A new report reveals that disadvantaged communities across New York are being hit hardest by the rapid expansion of massive warehouses, bringing increased diesel truck traffic, pollution, and serious health risks like asthma and heart disease. Joining me now is the project manager of Zero Emissions Trucks Initiative for the Environmental Defense Fund, Sam Becke, as well as the Senior Transportation Planner for the NYC Environmental Justice Alliance, Kevin Garcia. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having
Thanks
us.
for having us.
So to kick things off, just tell us a little bit about the 2025 Warehouse Boom Report and what is it all about?
This report, which Environmental Defense Fund released in collaboration with Electrify New York, provides new data at the state, regional, and legislative district level, detailing the massive expansion of warehouses and the associated health impacts. Across the state, we find nearly 3,000 mega warehouses, and these warehouses compose almost enough square footage to blanket the entirety of Manhattan. As a result of the warehouse boom, 1 in 4 New Yorkers now lives within half a mile of these mega warehouses, and more warehouses than ever before are located next to schools, homes, and community centers. A single warehouse can generate up to 1,000 polluting truck trips in a single day, and as a result of the warehouse boom, we're seeing that close to 250,000 of these truck trips are being generated by warehouses. Each of these truck trips releases toxic pollution that can cause a harmful environment for warehouse workers and for people living close by.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, New York City is a hub for everything. You name it, right? Bars, restaurants, clubs, shopping centers. But now warehouses are also booming in the city. What's driving this trend?
So the warehouse boom is being fueled by the rise in e-commerce. As a result of increased demand for e-commerce, we've seen warehouse square footage and the truck trips coming to and from these warehouses increase exponentially, with the largest increase coming over the last 5 years, which corresponds with the COVID-19 pandemic. This isn't just an issue that impacts people in the Bronx or New York City. People across the entire state are suffering from a massive expansion in polluting diesel truck trips associated with the warehouse boom. It's also an issue that's impacting people in legislative districts that have little to no warehouses, and that's because the increased demand for e-commerce is creating an increase in the truck trips originating in nearby districts and truck trips that are crisscrossing these districts that have little to no warehouses.
Sam, thank you so much for sharing that. Kevin, tell me, what are your thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, so what we've seen is the rise in online shopping and the siting of these e-commerce warehouses that do not go through any public or environmental review, and this is really because of our antiquated zoning regulations. But what's really disheartening to see is who is affected most by this expansion. So this report highlights that warehouses are disproportionately located in state-defined disadvantaged communities. And while these communities make up just over 8% of the state, half of these facilities are in these communities. But we're also seeing the widespread racial disparities among who lives near these facilities. So in New York, Black and Hispanic/Latinx communities are 1.5 times more likely to live within a half mile of a warehouse than compared to the state's demographics.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned it's just this rise of e-commerce and consumerism we're seeing on social media. There's just this trend in shopping and influencing and all this kind of stuff that in my perspective, I feel could also lead to that as well. Again, especially in New York City. Now, tell me, you mentioned it a little bit about who's mostly affected by this expansion. And for a lot of New Yorkers who don't necessarily know about this at this moment, tell me a little bit about why should they care? Why do they need to care?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we need to understand who lives near them. So these are the communities, some of that are the lowest income households, communities of color that have historically been disproportionately impacted by the siting and operation of polluting infrastructure, whether it's peaker power plants, bus depots, and highways, right? So, when we look at, for example, the Bronx, it has some of the worst air quality and some of the highest asthma rates, where about 1 in 5 children have asthma. And that impacts the child's life. So that impacts their physical, emotional, and academic growth. And it also impacts their family as well, where the parent will have to miss work because they have to now go take their child to the doctor's appointment or pick their child up from school when they're having an asthma attack. And everyday New Yorkers should care about this, because like as Sam mentioned, this is not just a New York City issue. This is not a downstate issue. This is an issue across the entire state. And even though you may not have a facility in your community or in your neighborhood, you're also feeling the secondary impacts of these facilities. The increased truck traffic, the increase in pollution. So unless these facilities are regulated, we're going to continue seeing all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And now one thing that I'm seeing here is the massive increase in warehouses are also leading to a massive increase in diesel trucks, correct?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit again about that and the impact that that's also having on top of the warehouses.
Diesel trucks, which include delivery vans, box trucks, and semi-trucks, release large amounts of pollution, including nitrogen dioxide and small particulate matter, particulates that are so small they get lodged deep within our lungs where they begin to wreak havoc. Exposure to pollutants like nitrogen dioxide and small particulate matter cause thousands of diseases across the state each year, like asthma, COPD, and stroke, and they also cause hundreds of deaths each year. Despite the fact that these diesel trucks make up a small percentage of vehicles that are on our roads, they make up a disproportionately large fraction of the transportation sector's total pollution. And so what we're seeing is in the Bronx County, which has one of the highest asthma rates in the entire country, an annual estimated 1 in 5 or 2,800 new childhood asthma cases are caused by nitrogen dioxide pollution, which is a main pollutant released by diesel trucks.
Yeah, thank you once again for sharing that. And I want to go back to, Kevin, what you mentioned earlier about where these warehouses are placed. Now, it says here that 50% of warehouses are in disadvantaged communities, which is only 8.1% of the state. So can you give us some insight into how did that happen?
Yeah, a lot of this is because, of previous planning or policy decisions, right? So, when we look at New York City, it's like redlining, but also discriminatory housing policies, but also, our antiquated zoning regulations. So, in many cities, a lot of these warehouses are not defined, and they're allowed to be built as of right without any community or environmental review. And a lot of these warehouses also a lot of these warehouse developers and operators like to build and operate near highways because they're trying to meet that, same day, next day delivery demand. So they need to be able to move the goods in and out of the warehouse as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. And I'd love to hear both of your opinions on this. Is this a case of environmental racism or economic neglect or both?
I think it's definitely, environmental neglect due to, the previous decisions on like where we site things and how, we allow people to live. And, we've basically have allowed these warehouses to, come up online without any environmental or public review. So a lot of communities are only finding out once they are there. And once they see this increase in traffic or increase in pollution, and we need to make sure that we're regulating these warehouse operators.
Kevin said it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. And so in that, let's move on to the Clean Deliveries Act. What would this bill do, and how would it help reduce pollution?
Yeah, so at its core, what the Clean Deliveries Act would do is reduce emissions from these facilities. And it would be done by creating or establishing this process called an indirect source rule. So it's a process where the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation will look at all of these qualifying e-commerce warehouses and come up with individual plans for how to reduce the emissions. The warehouse operators would be given a menu of options for how they can do it, and then they would receive credits for how they're taking action to reduce the emissions. And the warehouse operators would have to also do annual reporting so that we're ensuring that they're meeting those goals.
Yeah, and I mean, with the bill, it would be easy to assume that companies can just clean up for themselves. But let's talk about why the legislation is so necessary to have that in place.
Yeah, it's very necessary because the transportation sector is the second largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and we need to make sure that New York State and other states are also taking bold action to address the climate crisis. And by reducing the number of diesel truck trips, as Sam mentioned, even though they make up a small portion of the vehicles on our roads, they do contribute to some of the nastiest air. So by reducing the number of diesel truck trips, we're going to see that improvement in air quality. And New York State would be the first state to enact a statewide policy like this if the Clean Deliveries Act is passed. But it's not the first time we've seen this in the United States, and I think Sam, maybe you can share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So we've seen this indirect source review policy enacted in other states and sub-state jurisdictions across the country. Oregon, for example, has had a indirect source review to reduce pollution associated with the construction industry on the books for decades. And what we saw in 2021 is that the Los Angeles metro region took an innovative approach to reducing pollution associated with the e-commerce boom by enacting a bill, a rule much similar to Clean Deliveries Act, which is well on its way to reducing hundreds of deaths, thousands of asthma attacks, and tens of thousands of lost work and school days by 2031, while saving the region $2.7 billion. The benefits of the program are expected to outweigh the costs by a ratio of 3 to 1.
Absolutely. I want to thank you both so much for joining us. I feel like I've learned so much in this small amount of time, and I know our viewers have as well. So thank you again for joining us this morning.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for having us.
If you want to read more about the Warehouse Boom 2025 report, please go to the website on the screen below. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recablecast at 5 and 8 p.m. tonight on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios 33, or watch anytime on the web at BronxNet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Jaime on Wednesday and Rena Valentin on Friday. I'm Brittany Skyler. Stay informed, inspired, and safe. Talk soon.